Now our theme today is what I call divine lockup. Pam was trying to get in the door, and that one door side is locked. And that's why we propped the other side open, because she thought she was locked out. And she thought the truth was locked up in here. And the fact is, God does lock up in the Scriptures. There's a lot of locking up by God going on in the Scriptures. And that's what we're going to talk about for our brief time today, is divine lockup. Our very first topic that we're going to talk about is that we're locked up in unbelief. We're going to talk about divine lockup in unbelief. I want you to notice the first verse that we have. All these are the same verse. These are Romans 11:32. You can follow with me in the Bible if you want, but the Scripture's right here. Come on in. Romans 11:32 says that, this is the King James, God hath concluded them all in unbelief. The Young says, God did shut up together the whole in unbelief. God, this is Rotherham, God hath shut them all up together in a refusal to yield. Concordance says, God locks up all together in stubbornness. Concordant version. Now, I want you to notice some things that are happening in this verse. First of all, we got an agent. We got somebody active. And all the versions agree as to who's the active one. God. God's doing what we read in this verse. He's the one that is the agent of activity. God. Now, notice the second thing. Who's the subject? Well, all. The whole. All together. All together. All. God's the agent, and He's doing something to the whole. To all. Now, what's the action? Well, the action is concluded. Talk about that word in a minute. Shut up, locks up. Like the concordant, can't miss that one up. But of course, if you shut something up, of course, this has got a lock on it. Nothing's getting out. God is the agent. All, the whole of mankind is the subject. The action is that God is locking up. And what's the condition? What are we all being locked up in? Unbelief. Unbelief. Refusal to yield, stubbornness. So something that I call stubborn refusal to believe. And that's where mankind is. You see it, don't you? Look at the world. We say, how come they can't believe? Well, it's all pretty clear, isn't it? This is what God has to say. So, the question is, the unbelief that's in the world, who's responsible? Is it the individuals? Are they responsible for their unbelief? Is it Satan? He's responsible for their unbelief. No. Paul says, by divine revelation, that the issue of unbelief on this planet is God's responsibility. I'll say this. Unbelief is the current default setting of humanity. We're all born in unbelief, we live in unbelief, and we will die in unbelief unless God unlocks us from unbelief and puts us in faith. Now, the first word I want to look at, we're going to look at these words a little bit here in this first session, but the word I want you to notice here is the word that is this word, the action that God's doing, the locking up. That Greek word there, sukleo, is defined as to shut up together. Shut up together. That's an interesting translation, since that's one of the definitions. It's defined as to enclose, to shut up on all sides, to shut up completely. Now, it's interesting, the King James, I grew up reading and listening to the King James. Now, I'm often critical of King James. We're going to give him a little slack here. The Old English word for conclude may have been quite acceptable there, actually. But in our day, it sounds like that God came to a conclusion. He looked around and said, I believe I conclude everybody is an unbelief. And it doesn't, God all of a sudden doesn't become an agent. He's just an observer. But that's not actually what that word is. In fact, Webster's 1828 says that the word conclude means to shut up. See? Okay. So the problem is that the word evolves, sort of. But really, if you think about when you come to a conclusion, you know what you've done?
Come to the end.
You've shut something up. You've finished, okay? In other words, you've locked up, okay, I've concluded about that. So anyway, or like you said, we have come to the end of something. But anyway, and it's interesting because the King James Version in other places translates this Greek word as, listen, to enclose. And in another place, to shut up. The King James uses it in another place. And I'll tell you where that is. It's in Galatians 3:23. Just listen, I'll read it to you. Before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up. Shut up. That's the same word. See? So really all the translations are in agreement when you get to looking at them that God's the agent of locking something up. Now, probably my favorite use of the word in the King James is in Luke 5:6. Now just listen. Everything I'm going to be giving you is Luke 5:6 says, they enclosed. That's this word. They enclosed a great multitude of fish. You know what that is? That's a net. Trapping, enclosing, locking up, binding. I love that definition. You know what God has done? God has taken a net on the whole, on all together. He has taken all of humanity and He's put it in a net and He's drawn it. And you know what that net is? Unbelief. Now this word here for unbelief, interesting that it's sort of translated sometimes a little differently in different places, but if you'll listen to the definition, you might get it. The definitions are disbelief that is obstinate and rebellious. Not just disbelief. It's not like, did you know that there's a God and that He sent His Son and His Son went to the Calvary and died? And it's not...
Samuel Seleshi in the library, could you please come to the information desk? Samuel Seleshi.
You know, I'm hearing voices. Now, it's not just unbelief. No, I don't believe that. According to the definition, it's a certain kind of unbelief. It's an obstinate and rebellious. It's a refusal to yield to faith. It's a stubbornness. No. Boy, there is no zeal like those who oppose God. It's stubborn. It is a refusal to yield. Here's another definition. That was Strong's definition, by the way. Thayer's defines it as obstinacy. Obstinate opposition, listen to this. Obstinate opposition to the divine will. Wow. Is that humanity? Now, can they really oppose the will of God? No. But their heart is set on it. Wow. And who's responsible? It is this sorry, low-down group of humans on the planet, right? No. They didn't lock themselves up in that. The fish didn't say, I'm going to go to the store and get a net and jump in it. This is not Satan's doing. It doesn't say, Satan. Oh, see, that's the way Christianity will want this verse, really, right? Satan did shut up altogether the whole world in unbelief. No, it's God who's doing this. And I like the key word concordance definition of this Greek word. Unpersuadableness. You can forget it. You ever hear the phrase, you can talk to them till you're blue in the face?
Yeah.
They are unpersuadable. That's why, well, this is a side note, right? But you and I, after a while, learn that, Either God's given folks ears to hear and eyes to see or not. You know. Otherwise, they're unpersuadable. It's not about how well you articulate. It's not how well you know the points. It's not that you use the right little words. You know those old classes that Christianity have of evangelism. Now, you say this, A, B, C, D. If they say this, you say this. You say salesmanship. The world can't be sold on something they're locked up away from. Ever. So never forget that. It's never been about you. And if you're trying to share this message, first of all, if you believe, it's not about you. It's not your faith. It's the faith of Christ. And if you're trying to share this with others, it's not about your presentation. You can tell it the worst that anybody ever told it on the planet. And if God's given someone the eyes to see and the ears to hear, they will hear it and see it. Period. Bottom line. Okay, so humanity has been caught in the net of unbelief by God. The character of this unbelief is obstinate and rebellious and unpersuadable. No wonder Paul said in Romans chapter 3, verse 11, there is none that seeketh after God. None. Now you say, well, I sought God. He was just letting you out of the net. That's all. You weren't seeking Him. He's seeking you. You got the whole picture backwards. Okay? Now, we're going to look at two examples. We're going to look at two examples. The first example we're going to look at is from the Greek Scriptures. And I'm going to read it to you. You don't even have to go there. You can if you want. But again, it's John chapter 20. And, John chapter 12 and verse 37. We're going to look at an example from the Greek Scriptures. John 12, verse 37. These things Jesus speaks, and coming away, he was hid from them. Listen now, he was hid from them. Yet, after having done so many signs in front of them, now listen to this, they believed not. Jesus did all these great signs, and the Scripture says, and they believed not. Signs and wonders and miracles are nothing. It's faith. It's the ability to see. That's the key. And it says, and they believed not in Him, that the word of Isaiah the prophet, which he said, may be being fulfilled. Now down to verse 39 for time's sake. And it says, and therefore, listen to this, therefore they could not believe. Verse 38 says they did not believe. Verse 39 tells us why, because they could not believe. People do not believe because they cannot believe, because they are locked up in unbelief. They can't believe. God's not called us to go around and telling people to do something they can't do. We share the glorious message, and if God gives them the eyes to see and the ears to hear, they will believe. Notice he says, and He hath blinded their eyes and calloused their hearts, listen, lest they should be perceiving. You know what? The truth of God is so plain and evident and clear, the whole world would believe if He didn't close their eyes and stop up their ears, lest they believe. Who Jesus Christ is so clear. This message we have is so clear. You know, we present this message as a capital area fellowship. I mean, you know, how many people live up here anyway? You know, in this whole this massive area. Look at us. Look how many. This is God's plan. This is God's doings. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to look at. Now, I want to get an example from the Old Testament. And a great example in the Old Testament is Pharaoh. Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Listen, in Exodus chapter, I'll just put it here on the side. In Exodus, there are 17 occasions in 7 chapters that the Scriptures say Pharaoh's heart was hardened. 17 times in 7 chapters. I'd say that's a pretty major theme going on in Exodus, that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. The interesting thing is, of these 17 occurrences, they fall in 3 categories. First of all, it's just a plain statement. Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And by the way, that simple statement given is 4 times. 4 times the Scripture says, of these 17, it just states it as a fact. The second occasion is that Pharaoh did it. And that is 3 times. It says Pharaoh hardened his heart. 3 times. And you can do the math, right? 10 times it says God did it. God hardened Pharaoh's heart 10 times. The ratio between who did it is 10 to 3, 3 to 10. That Pharaoh was. Now, this one is the human viewpoint. That's the relative. This is the divine viewpoint, the absolute. You know why Pharaoh hardened his heart? Because Pharaoh hardened his heart 3 times, because God hardened his heart 10 times. And in fact, of these 17 occurrences, the first 3 all say that God did it. 4:21 says, I will harden his heart. 7:3 says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. 7:13 says, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. 2 declarations he will, 1 that he did, and all the rest are to follow. The point we learn here is that God is the first cause. God is the great cause. God is the ultimate cause. Everything comes out of God. I call it the divine cycle. Paul says in Romans chapter 11, verse 36, for out of him, and through him, and to him are what? All things. I put all things right here. What's not in there? Nothing, right? I mean, what's excluded from there? All things. God. Coming out of God is all things. Going through God is all things. Coming back to God are all things. I love these words here. These are powerful words. These are prepositions that Paul uses. The first preposition he uses is ek, like an ecclesia, called out. It's coming out. That speaks of its origin. The origin of all things is God. Through is a preposition that's a channel. It's an act. It's an action. All action is through God. And then that last one is ice. It's the destination. The origin of everything is God. The channel of its activity and action is God. Its conclusion, where it's going to end up, its destiny is God. God's the origin, He's the channel, He's the destination. Now, some of you gave the right answer a minute ago, even though I sort of led you. This word's really just added by the translators. Not just things. All things are not. All is out of God. All is through God. All is to God. So how far do you take that, Clyde? I'll just take it as far as God did. And Paul did. All. It doesn't say a few. A few things are out of God. A few things are through God. A few things are to God. It doesn't say some. Doesn't say many. Doesn't say most. It says all. This is why Paul could, in Acts 17, talking to pagans, could make a bold declaration to idol-worshiping pagans. He could say, for in him we, me and you idol-worshiping pagans, for in him we live and move and have our being. You know the whole world moves in God? Steps of a man, not just good. The steps of a man are ordered by the Lord. You know? The more you understand this truth, you don't have to sit in front of the TV at the evening news and rail and get angry and your blood pressure go up by all the stupid people on the planet. They're all stupid because God made them stupid. Right? They're in stubbornness. It's okay. It's all temporary. It's all going to be fixed. So Pharaoh's a part of this cycle, right? Pharaoh's out of God. In fact, you know what? Here's what we read from Pharaoh. In Exodus 9:16, God says this to Pharaoh, "For this cause have I raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be great throughout all the earth." You know who put Pharaoh in power? Pharaoh was God's man. He was a man of God. Wow. Let me ask you a question. Who was God's servant, Moses or Pharaoh? Yes, yes. Who did the will of God, Moses or Pharaoh? Yes, yes. Who did the will of God to perfection, Moses or Pharaoh? Yes, yes. All is out of God. All is through God. All is to God. Pharaoh was God's employee just as much as Moses was God's employee. All of creation serves God's purpose. And Moses and Pharaoh were both divine servants of God. But then, thanks be to God, God has a key to this lock. And He locks all of humanity up, and then He uses the key. And one by one, in due course, He is going to unlock them all. One by one. We've got unlocked. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
And the only reason we have faith is it was given to us by God as a gift. Faith is a gift of God. Philippians 1:29 says that it was given to you in the behalf of Christ to believe. Given to you. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 and 9. "For by grace are you saved through faith, and that not out of you." In fact, this is why the Scriptures over and over speak of the faith of Christ. Is what is our faith that saves. It's faith to all. A wonderful verse, if you've never seen it. You might want to write this down. Acts 17. I'm going to stop here. Acts 17 and verse 31. Notice that especially in the Concordant, doesn't really, well, but especially in the Concordant, it says that God is tendering faith to all. Tendering faith to all. This is God's ultimate plan, to tender faith to all. The Devar says, having let all have faithing. Faith. All are going to have faith. And this is the rest of the story. By the way, you know what the rest of the story is? Right there in that verse. Listen, I'm going to read it to you in all these versions. What's the rest of this verse? The thing is, this is not the end right here. There's more over here in every one of those verses. Listen to the end of 11:32. God hath concluded them all belief, that He might have mercy on what? All. All gets locked up, all gets out. Listen to Young says, that the whole might do kindness. He might do kindness. Rotherham says, in order that, He's locked up all, in order that upon all He may bestow mercy. Concordance says that He's locked up all in stubbornness, that He should be merciful to all.